Mr. Croft, your analysis is beautiful, but it is just a cover for either incompetence or a deliberate conspiracy. And I tend to believe the latter. That resounding statement, uttered by a complete stranger, pierced the tense atmosphere in the Summit Dynamics boardroom like a bullet. 11 of the company's most powerful faces turned around, staring at her in utter shock. Beside her, Logan Hayes, the CEO on the verge of losing everything, just nodded calmly, as if he had just played his last trump card. The woman, introduced just minutes ago as his wife, now took the stage, turning the boardroom into her own personal battlefield. The atmosphere in the Summit Dynamics boardroom in Denver, Colorado, was thick and tense enough to be slicing. 11 of the company's most powerful men sat around a long, polished ebony table, silent as statues. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls from the 50th floor, but it did nothing to dispel the chill that hung over the room. At the head of the table, Logan Hayes, the company's 40-year-old CEO, had just finished his presentation. His expensive suit did nothing to hide the fatigue on his face, but his eyes burned with determination. As Logan sat down, Julian Croft, the executive vice president, stood up. He was a shark in a suit, with a smug smile and a steely gaze. Croft walked to the big screen and began his rebuttal in a smooth, convincing voice. Colorful charts, complex numbers, and dense financial analysis appeared. His message was clear and ruthless. The R&D department, the heart and soul of Summit Dynamics, the place where some of the most groundbreaking robotics and AI technologies were born, was a money-burning machine. "Ladies and gentlemen," Croft said, his voice echoing in the silence, "we are a business, not a charity lab. Continuing to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into projects with no clear path to commercialization is irresponsible to our shareholders. I propose we restructure drastically, sell our entire R&D division, along with our core patents, to our competitor, TechCorp. They have made an offer of $1.5 billion, a figure that would immediately maximize the value of our stock." Logan felt his blood rush to his head. Selling off R&D would be like selling off the soul of the company his father had built. "Julian, you don't understand," Logan tried to argue. "Our vision isn't about next quarter's profits. It's about shaping the future of robotics. Those projects are the seeds of our dominance over the next 10 years. His words were passionate, but against the cold data Croft presented, they were weak, like the excuses of a dreamer. He looked around the table. The eyes of the board members began to waver. Even Beatrice Davenport, 70, a longtime board member and Logan's guardian after his father died, frowned, looking disappointed. She valued legacy, but she was also a pragmatic businesswoman. Croft's argument, though brutal, seemed financially sound. Croft's hostile takeover was almost successful. Logan felt like he was sinking. In that moment of desperation, he turned to the woman who had sat silently beside him since the beginning of the meeting. She was his secret weapon, his last resort. "The council has heard my side of the story," Logan said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Now, I would like to hear the views of my most trusted partner and strategic advisor, my wife, Ella." A murmur of surprise spread through the room. Logan Hayes' wife. Since when everyone knew Logan was a lone wolf, dedicating his entire life to his work? Julian Croft paused, the smug smile on his lips momentarily frozen. All eyes turned to Ella. Ella Vance stood up. She was dressed in a charcoal gray business suit, simple but perfectly tailored. Her dark hair was pulled back into a bun. She exuded an air of calm that was intimidating. She was unfazed by the 11 pairs of powerful eyes studying her. With a nod to Logan, she walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. She didn't argue about vision or legacy. She confronted Croft on his own turf numbers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and decisive, "I have carefully reviewed Mr. Croft's analysis. It is impressive, but dangerously flawed. With quick, decisive strokes." She began sketching out diagrams, writing down numbers. "First, Mr. Croft's financial model ignores opportunity costs. Our R&D division is sitting on 3 projects that are nearing completion, with an estimated market potential of $2 billion over the next 5 years. Selling them now would be giving them away to our competitors. She drew a line, pointing to a point. Second, the legal side. Selling off 2 core patents, AX7 and NeuroNet, would set a dangerous legal precedent. It would weaken the intellectual property of our entire portfolio, opening the door to a flood of lawsuits from smaller competitors. The potential legal costs could be as high as $500 million. The silence in the room was no longer the silence of agreement with Croft, but the silence of intense concentration. And finally, about the partner Mr. Croft proposed. Ella continued, her voice as cold as ice. Tech Corp. Mr. Croft's report indicated that they were financially sound, but he forgot to mention a $300 million off-balance sheet liability related to a legal settlement in Europe. This information can only be found in the appendix of their last year's annual report, page 247, footnote 12. They are on the brink of a cash crunch. They want to buy our R&D not to grow, but to sell it off piecemeal, to save themselves. She put down her pen. The whiteboard was now a battlefield, Croft's numbers utterly defeated. The room held its breath. Julian Croft stood there, pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He was naked. Ella turned and looked directly at Beatrice Davenport. Her voice was warmer, but still authoritative. Mrs. Davenport, I know that you and Logan's father, Robert Hayes, founded this company. He founded Summit Dynamics on a single principle, continuous innovation to create the future. Selling off R&D is not a wise business strategy. It would erase Robert's legacy, and it would betray the very soul of this company. The room fell silent. Mrs. Davenport looked at Ella, her eyes no longer filled with suspicion, but with deep admiration and respect. She nodded slowly. You're right, my dear. We almost made a terrible mistake. She turned to Julian Croft, her eyes cold as steel. Julian, your proposal is rejected. Ella didn't just save Logan. She won over the entire board with her sharp intellect, thorough preparation, and emotional yet logical appeal. But as Logan looked at her with gratitude and wonder, the biggest question still hung in the air. Who exactly was this extraordinary woman, and what had driven her to enter this battle of survival so perfectly prepared a week ago? Logan Hayes was sitting in his office, running his fingers through his hair. He had just received a call from a friend in finance, an urgent warning Julian is lobbying. He'll make his move at the next meeting. He has the votes. Logan. Even Beatrice is leaning toward him. His longtime advisor, an older man, shook his head. Logan, you're a genius at technology. No one can deny that. But in their eyes, especially Beatrice's, you're still just a big, impulsive, reckless kid burning through their money. You need to show them that you're grown up, stable, and grounded. A solid foundation. The thought kept ringing in Logan's head. He'd spent his life working, never having time for a serious relationship, but now that lack of it was threatening to destroy everything he held dear. In desperation, a crazy idea struck him. He didn't need a girlfriend to show off. He needed a partner, a strategic mind who could stand up to the sharks on the board, someone who could speak the language they understood. He picked up the phone and called a top headhunting firm. I need to find a senior strategic advisor, he said, for a short-term, top-secret project. Requirements brilliant, decisive, and must be able to convince the devil. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on Capitol Hill, Ella Vance sat among stacks of old documents. She gently flipped through the yellowed blueprints of her father, Arthur Vance. The smell of old paper brought back memories of a talented but ill-fated man. On her laptop screen was a newspaper article, Logan Hayes' Summit Dynamics nears acquisition of Axiom Robotics. Ella's heart pounded. Axiom Robotics. That was the company. 20 years ago, they had stolen her father's groundbreaking robotic arm technology, bankrupted his small company, and left him devastated and forgotten. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She had left a burgeoning career in Chicago, returned to Denver, Spent years becoming a top strategy analyst, all for this day. She needed to get inside Summit Dynamics. She needed to find evidence to expose Axiom's crimes, to restore justice and honor to her father. Through an industry acquaintance, she learned that Logan was desperately looking for a mentor. She immediately sent in her resume. The interview took place in Logan's office late at night. He was immediately struck by her sharpness and lack of reserve. He didn't beat around the bush. He laid out the gauntlet of his predicament. "They think I'm not mature enough," Logan said, looking out at the glittering city of Denver below. "They need to see some stability." It was then that Logan's crazy idea met Ella's perfect target. "I need you to be more than just an advisor," Logan said, turning to look her straight in the eye. "In that meeting, pretend to be my wife. It will give you an undisputed position. It will give your words a weight that a normal advisor cannot have." Ella was stunned for a moment, playing the CEO's wife ridiculous. But then she realized that this was the quickest, only way for her to gain unrestricted access to confidential company documents, especially those related to the Axiom acquisition. "I agree," she said, her tone cool and professional. "But on two conditions. First, the price is $100,000 non-negotiable. Second, I want absolute access to all data related to the Axiom robotics acquisition, immediately." Logan didn't hesitate for a second. Agreed. A hastily drawn-up contract, a strange deal made. Little did they know, they were entering a game that would change both of their lives forever. The conference room door closed behind the last person. The tension dissipated, leaving Logan and Ella standing alone in the large room. Logan turned to look at her, his eyes filled with amazement, admiration, and deep gratitude. "Ella, you're amazing," he stammered. "I've never seen anyone silence Julian Croft like that. You saved me. You saved the company." "I was just doing my job," Ella replied, trying to remain professional, but she couldn't hide the slight satisfaction in her voice. They returned to Logan's penthouse. The initial awkwardness quickly wore off. They were no longer CEO and fake wife. They were a team, an unlikely but highly effective alliance. In the days that followed, they worked together like a well-oiled machine. They pored over data analysis, prepared for Croft's next move, and plotted strategies to solidify Logan's position. The dining room table in the penthouse became a war room, covered with printouts, charts, and half-finished cups of coffee. During that intense work, unexpected moments began to arise, melting the professional ice between them. One night, at 2 a.m., Logan walked out of his office to find Ella asleep at her keyboard, her cheek resting on a stack of financial reports. A lock of hair fell across her forehead. He stood there for a long moment, watching her. He felt an unexpected tenderness. He gently took off his jacket, draped it over her shoulders, and quietly returned to his office. Another day. Ella walked into Logan's private lab and found him engrossed in explaining a new robot model. His eyes lit up like a little boy who had just received a new toy. His pure passion was a far cry from the nervous CEO in the boardroom. She couldn't help but smile. She realized that behind that edgy exterior was the heart of a true innovator. They argued heatedly over a point of strategy, their voices growing louder. And then suddenly, they looked at each other and burst out laughing at each other's stubbornness. In those moments, the intellectual respect gradually transformed into something else. Warmer, more personal. Logan found he liked the sound of her laugh, the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the uncompromising determination she displayed. He had hired a brain, but he seemed to be falling for her as a person. And Ella, who came here with the sole purpose of revenge, finds herself drawn to Logan's integrity and vision. He's not a CEO who's only interested in money. He genuinely cares about his father's legacy, about the future of technology. He's a good man, surrounded by wolves, and she, surprisingly, wants to protect him. While helping Logan consolidate his power, Ella didn't forget her primary mission. With the access granted, she spent hours each night digging into Axiom Robotics data archives, documents that Summit Dynamics had collected during its due diligence. After many sleepless nights, she finally found it. Deep in an old server, protected by multiple layers of encryption, was a folder labeled Project Nightingale. Inside were her father's original blueprints, scanned copies signed by Arthur Vance, and, most horrifyingly, a 20-year-old internal email chain discussing how to tweak the designs to avoid being sued for copyright infringement. It was irrefutable evidence. Ella's heart pounded. She had done it. She had what she needed to destroy the Axiom. But as she continued reading, she found something even more shocking. In that email chain, someone spoke out against it. A junior executive sent a letter to Axiom's leadership, warning them of the legal and ethical consequences of the theft. "Not only is this illegal," he wrote, "it is a betrayal of the innovative spirit that our industry stands for." When he was ignored, the person sent another email, threatening to report the incident. A few days later, a brief announcement came. He was fired for not fitting in with the company culture. Ella held her breath when she read the name of that young, upright director, Julian Croft. Ella's whole world is turned upside down. Julian Croft, Logan's current enemy, the man she just helped defeat, is the one person who tried to protect her father in the past. But why would he now want to sell Summit Dynamics R&D and to a subsidiary of the old Axiom? It doesn't make any sense. Unless a terrifying hypothesis formed in Ella's mind. She dove into the data, and she saw it. TechCorp, the company Croft had proposed selling its R&D to, was not just a competitor. TechCorp's CEO was the former CEO of Axiom, the mastermind behind the theft. Croft's true motives suddenly became crystal clear. He wasn't just after profit. He was trying to destroy Summit Dynamics to save himself. If Logan's acquisition of Axiom Robotics went through, the final due diligence would surely expose the entire scandal. Croft's name, even as an opponent, would be brought to light. The past he had tried to bury would be dug up. The sale of the R&D division to TechCorp was a secret deal, a way to permanently bury the Axiom deal, erase all traces. He was willing to sacrifice an entire company to protect his secret. Ella felt a chill run down her spine. She had entered a chess game much more complex than she had imagined, and she was right in the middle of it. The board of directors was called for an extraordinary meeting, a final vote on the company's future. Julian Croft entered the meeting room, his face confident again. He believed he had enough time to lobby, to turn the situation around after the previous failure. Logan started the meeting, but instead of talking about numbers, he turned to Ella. "Before we vote, Ella has a few things to share. This isn't just about profits, it's about integrity, about who we are." Ella stood up. Her computer was connected to the big screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm but weighty. "Last week, I spoke of the legacy of Robert Hayes. Today, I want to speak of another legacy, the legacy of my father, Arthur Vance." She began to tell her father's story. She projected his original blueprints onto the screen, alongside early Axiom Robotics products. The similarities were undeniable. Then she showed the email chain, evidence of the theft. An indignant silence fell over the room. "Our acquisition of Axiom Robotics is more than just a business opportunity," Ella said. "It's an opportunity to right a past wrong, to do justice." Then she delivered the fatal blow. "But there is one person in this room who does not want justice to be served. One person who has the greatest motive to destroy this deal, and destroy our company if necessary, just to cover up the past." She clicked. The email from the young director from back then appeared on the screen. Julian Croft's name was enlarged. "Julian Croft," Ella said, looking straight at him. He was once the only person at Axiom with a conscience. But after being fired, he seems to have learned the wrong lesson. That integrity doesn't pay. He spent 20 years rebuilding his career, burying the past, and now he's willing to do anything to keep it from coming back up. The silence in the room was broken. Beatrice Davenport stood up abruptly, her face red with anger. She was not angry that Croft had tried to do the right thing. She was angry that he was trying to do the wrong thing now, for his cowardice and betrayal. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You are not just a traitor. You are a hypocrite, a coward. You are fired. Immediately. Security will escort you from this building." Julian Croft's plan had collapsed completely, beyond repair. Logan had not only saved the company, with Ella's help, he had cleansed it. preserving its soul and integrity. 3 months later, Summit Dynamics held a big press conference. The flashbulbs kept flashing. Logan, standing on the podium, looked confident and energetic. Next to him was Ella. Today, I am pleased to announce that Summit Dynamics has officially completed the acquisition of Axiom Robotics, Logan announced. But he didn't stop there. But more importantly, to honor the unsung innovators who have contributed to the advancement of technology, we have decided to establish the Arthur Vance Innovation Fund. With an initial capital of $50 million, this fund will provide funding to young, independent engineers and inventors who have breakthrough ideas but lack the resources. In the front row, Ella smiled through her tears. Her father's honor had not just been restored, it had been celebrated in the most glorious way. That evening, in Logan's office, the $100,000 wife rental contract remained on the desk. Never signed, Logan walked over to Ella, who was looking out at the night city. "I knew I was in love with you the moment you picked up that pen and exposed Croft in that first meeting," Logan confessed, his voice low. "Your intelligence, your courage, everything about you. That contract was for a strategist, but what I really needed, what I really wanted, was a partner. In business and in life." Ella turned back, smiling. "I came here seeking justice for my father, but I found something I never dreamed of." Logan opened a drawer and took out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was not a flashy diamond, but an exquisitely designed ring with a deep blue sapphire, the same blue as the ink on Arthur Vance's old designs. "This ring isn't for the board," he said, his voice sincere. "It's for you and for me. Ella Vance, will you really be my wife? No contracts, no conditions, just you and me." She nodded, without hesitation. "I agree." Logan. Their kiss sealed a new agreement, one not based on money or strategy, but built on truth, justice, and a love forged through the toughest trials. They began as reluctant partners in a dangerous game of chess, but in the end, they found in each other their true companions and love. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel, share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.